Hey, boo. Hey, happy whatever day you're listening to this on. So, today I want to talk about why you might feel like you're working harder or you're growing, but the freedom that you thought your business was going to give you once it took off, once you got the followers, once you made the money, why it is not giving you the freedom that you thought it would. So, one thing that I get a lot of people that come to me and they ask, like, they'll say things like, I thought that more revenue would mean that I would have more ease, or I would have more time, or I have more freedom, or I thought that growth meant freedom. I thought if I had more clients that I would just have more free, I would have the money to be able to do the things that I want to do. Something interesting that I've seen in the last couple of years of working with business owners, a lot of times more money has actually meant less space to live the life that people want to live. It's not because that's what should be happening. So I don't want you to think like it's supposed to be, if you make more money, you're going to have to work more or do more or be in the weeds or not have the freedom that you want. But what I've seen happen is that a lot of people are building their business to be them centered, right? And so if your business is founder centered, it's centered. So if your business is founder centered or centered on you having to produce and show up and be in the mix and be in the weeds of your business, you will always feel like as revenue increases, your time, your freedom is slowly decreasing. And a lot of people don't account for that. You have to think about how you're building your business, how you're building your offer before you actually launch, before you actually do the thing, before money comes in or more money comes in. You have to think about what's going to happen on the back end of all these new clients or more clients. This is something that I had to think about when I decided to do events in my photography business. I started doing like mini sessions. I started doing just different types of like events to basically serve more clients, but like in a shorter time period. And one thing that I didn't think about was the fact that I was going to have to edit all those daggone photos. I just did not really think forward and be like, oh yeah, if I take all these sessions on in a 2-hour period, I'm going to edit all these. And as someone who does not enjoy editing, I should have thought through that piece first because I charged a price that I thought was fair. But once I actually sold the offer and I was actually doing the work, I realized, wait a second now. Mama K is doing more work than I was paid for. And it's not their fault. Like I was what it is, right? This is a business model. This is a business model flaw, right? It was a flaw in the design of my offer. It's nobody else's fault. And so one thing that I find is that you find yourself quietly disappointed with your business, whether you're making money or not. And I find this happens a lot to people that are making money. Like when you're making money, people don't talk about how it can sometimes be disappointing. You can get to a point you're like, oh wow, that's what I was working this hard for. And it's because of a misalignment in your business model, or it's a misalignment in how you've designed parts of your business. And this is not your fault. This happens to all of it. It happens to the best of us. It happens to people who strategize and are intentional from the beginning. One of the biggest things that we have to think about is our capacity as a mom. And we have to think about our time as a mom. And when you put that up against what we're trying to build with our businesses, it can be this kind of push and pull of, well, how do I make sure that I'm building a business that honors my time and honors my capacity, right? And we have to think about those things kind of on the front side, but a lot of times we don't. Again, insert me deciding to host these events that they were great events. It was fun to do one part of it, but I didn't think about all the parts of it, right? The post-production that was required, and that the post-production sucked. I didn't enjoy it. I hated it. But now I have restructured the offer and I've restructured my business so that now it's supportive of what I want to do, which is host these events, and also what I have to do on the back end, which is deliver, these visuals and stuff that people were promised when they invested. That's made it to where I don't feel disappointed in this offer anymore. I don't feel disappointed in my photography business anymore. So one thing that I want to say is that I find that a lot of times we don't recognize or think about the fact that growth can increase your pressure instead of giving you margin. So a lot of times we think that if we grow our business, if we make more revenue, we make more sales, we have more clients, that's going to give us the margin to hire a team and to do this and the third. But sometimes because we don't have our business model optimized, our business model is not designed properly, maybe our offers are too, like, we're not designed for profit. We're not optimized for the ability to be able to hire a team or hire support. So because of that, now growth looks like pressure. It looks like, man, I have all these clients that I have to serve because I don't have actually enough margin to hire a team member, to hire help. It looks like, man, instead of me having more time, I actually have less time because there is no one else that can help me with fulfilling what I promised to people. So now where you thought, oh man, I just had a 5-figure launch. Yeah, but also with that 5-figure launch came you having to work way more than you intended. and that takes away from your home life. So there's these things that we don't always think about, and that can be very disappointing. When you experience it, it can be very like, whoa, like you can have a whiplash moment. And I find that this is one of the biggest reasons why someone will experience like, man, I just had like a 5-figure launch, and then you will literally sabotage yourself. And it's because what you actually are is disappointed that you didn't see it coming. Like you didn't see the disconnect of, wow, more money actually did add some problems that I wasn't expecting. But I want to encourage you and say that this is not something that can't be fixed. This is something that can easily be fixed if you really take the time to think through, okay, what is actually happening in my business model? Where are things breaking down? What's the bottleneck? What's happening here? And what is reaching or getting too close to my capacity? It's reaching too close to a constraint that I want to place on my business. So I want to just like kind of briefly talk about like the false promise of growth. One thing that I find is that while growing and scaling sounds very fun, very sexy, all the girlies be talking about it, what I have found is that growing without redesign or intentionally designing actually creates a tighter cage. Okay. Because remember, in the last episode, I talked about constraints. I talked about how like every business has constraints, whether it's your time, whether it's your team, whether it's resources and money, like every business has these constraints. And at a certain point, your capacity is your capacity. And so sometimes when you grow your business and you're not thinking through the logistics, you're not thinking through how does this decision impact the business on a big picture, what will happen is that you will grow, you will make more revenue, you will make more money, and then you will feel basically like you are in a cage and there's nowhere to go, right? And it's because your growth has now met your capacity. Your growth has now met your constraint, and there's nowhere to go from that point, right? Now, obviously, I know there's somewhere to go. We can fix it, right? But this is just like a lot of times we're promised this idea of growth and scaling, and it sounds like cute on paper. But then when you experience it, or as you get close to it, it starts to feel scary. It starts to feel like, okay, how am I going to do all this or hold all this? How can I make space for this? You know, I think about people who, which is no shade, but like I think about people who have like 10,000 offers every month. They're doing a new mini offer, and like that's how they teach their clients to scale. And I'm like, girl, how am I finna do that as a mom of 2 toddlers? That's not happening, right? There's no way that I could have a business model that required me to launch a new offer every single month. Girl, give me a break. Absolutely not. But a lot of times we're promised this false promise of what growth and scaling looks like. And therefore you find yourself in a position where, yeah, you're growing, but when you look at it, you're like, dang, this actually feels very stifling, very suffocating, and this does not work for me. And so growth without intentional design, it becomes a tighter cage. Another thing that I want to talk about is like when you get to the point where you are making more revenue, maybe you are at a point where you're making 6 figures or just anything higher than 6 figures. A lot of moms will find this feeling of, man, I do not feel free at this higher income. I still feel boxed in. I still feel like I'm doing all this work to what end, right? I'm doing all this work and I feel like I have to sacrifice, or I'm feeling like I have to choose. If you follow my podcast back in 2023, I shared publicly how I was just unraveling and ungoaling, and I realized that like how hard I was working, how hard I was pushing wasn't really worth it, right? I got to that point. I'm like, this ain't really worth, like the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, okay? I was squeezing very hard to get to that point. And that was just 6 figures. Like I can only imagine trying to squeeze my way higher, right? And I eventually did squeeze higher. And I'm so glad that when I got to that 6-figure point, I had the thought of, yeah, this ain't gonna work. Like, your girl ain't finna come out like this. Like, I'm not going outside on account of nobody's dollar, right? And so I'm glad that I had that moment at that time and that I could publicly unravel, because one, I just had someone DM me the other day about they felt like they were unraveling, and I was just like, that's so funny, because like that's definitely my thing where I'm like, yeah, girl, I crashed out hard. Like before crashing out was a thing, I crashed out on my business. And so I think that something that we don't always talk about is like that crash out moment that you have as especially a mom in business when you're making more money, because at higher incomes, you would think, oh, it's going to get easier. But if your business is not designed in a way that actually supports you as a mother, you don't feel more free. You actually feel way more stressed than you did when you started, right? Like it actually felt better to make less money. And that's something that I talked about and that I experienced in 2023, where I shared I intentionally just lost money. Like I just intentionally was like, okay, no, I'm not going to have this offer. I'm not going to do this anymore. I did that on purpose, right? And I actually did an episode. I think I'm gonna try to link these episodes. But I did an episode talking about how I think it was 2020. Yeah, it was 2023 or 2024. I can't remember. But one of those years, I decided to intentionally like go backwards. Like, and I can't for the life of me, I can't remember what I called it at the time. But I intentionally decided to basically like not grow, like have a non-growing year, a non-growth year. And that was the best thing that I could have done because it allowed me to fix the foundation of my business. And so even though that year I didn't grow in the sense of like I didn't double my revenue or anything, I was able to sustain. And then the following year, let's just say Mama K was not hurting for nothing. Okay. And that is required, and I feel like if we don't have these honest conversations about this, you won't know. Like, you won't know what to expect, and you will hit a wall and you'll just think that it's just you. But it's not just you. Like, building a big business as a mom is a very like challenging and just interesting experience. But if we don't talk about the different stages within that, it's hard to know if you're the problem, if this is a problem, what's going on. And so I will say, I think there's a lot of false promises around growth, around scaling that we don't talk about. But baby girl, I'm going to tell you, okay? I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to tell you what's going on. And I'm going to tell you that at the end of the day, you can build a very big business and have freedom. I am living proof of that. My clients are living proof of that. You can have a big business. The women that I surveyed and interviewed inside of the State of Moms and Business report, they are evidence. Like, those women that are making 150, 200K, 300K plus, like, these women, they are evidence and proof that you can build a big business. But it has to be designed very intentionally. So I feel like I've already said this, but like, it's part of my notes, so I gotta say it. But I feel like the real trade-off that a lot of people do not explain for us moms in business, there's a trade-off between time, decision load, and emotional labor. And emotional labor, that one sneaks up on you, right? But decision load is the one that's like, whoa, like, this really caught me for a loop. But like, you never realize how many decisions you have to make until you start making them, and then you get tired of making decisions. And this happens a lot of times when we're just kind of doing all the things, when we're like trying to put a band-aid on stuff in our business, and we're not realizing that, like, oh, I could stop making this decision if I would just like create a process for this or a system for this. I could stop experiencing my clients basically using me as a therapist if I would just set the boundary of, hey, this is not therapy. This is what we talk about here. And so there is so many things that we have to trade off between, and everything requires our time. So we're always trading our time for one of these other areas. And if someone would have told me like how many decisions or how often I would have almost like create boundaries or constraints around like emotional labor, that would have been so helpful earlier in my business, because I found myself in a position where I was basically having to trade time for money, because right now I'm required for every step, every part of the business. And over time, at first it feels fun. It feels like, oh, I'm a boss, I'm a CEO, I'm doing, I'm like in it, right? And then you get to a point where you're like, wait a minute now. Like, how many times am I going to have to explain this? How many times am I going to have to do this one thing in particular? And that's going to, again, lead you to feel disappointed, frustrated, overwhelmed. You're going to feel all these feelings. What I have found is that a lot of times growth, it shifts the type of work that you have to do, but it shouldn't shift the volume. And that is what happens. Growth, it should actually shift the work that you're doing. It should not increase how much you're doing, right? And especially if you're scaling. Scaling is you're making more without having to do more. And so a lot of times what I find is that when people grow, it doesn't only shift the type of work you have to do, it also shifts the amount of work you're doing. And in that case, you're making a trade-off between time, between money, between emotional load, between decision load, like all these different things that you're having to do. You're trading your time for all these things. And now more money creates more work. If that's where you are, then we need to check your business model. We need to check and see, okay, what is happening in your strategy? What's happening in your timeline of what you're doing day to day, what your team is doing. If you don't have team, what are your systems doing? We have to look at all of these things to figure out where's the breakdown, right? Where is there a constraint? Where is there a boundary that's being overstepped? Where is a capacity that's being reached and it's at limit, and it's causing you to now have to do more work than you should be doing? And this is not me saying you should not be working. You should not be doing work in your business, because hello, it's a business, right? We have to do work. Like, there's things that have to be done. But at the end of the day, you should not have so much to do that you can't grow. You can't do anything further. You have reached a cap that you didn't even want to reach yet. Like, you're thinking to yourself, oh, I can grow more. I can double this. I can triple this. Meanwhile, your business actually cannot do that. Like, if that's happening, then that's when we need to say, okay, there's a capacity problem happening. There's a constraint problem happening. There's something happening in our business timeline that we need to fix, and we need to fix it immediately. Because if not, you're going to continue to have this trade-off, and you're going to continue to have this feeling of, what is the point of me doing all this, right? I am working harder, but my life, my money, like everything there's no freedom. Everything is feeling smaller. As moms, we already have very fragmented schedules, right? Our schedules are inconsistent and they're fragmented, right? For most most, I use that very loosely, but for a lot of people, they can work all day long, right? But if you are a mom of toddlers, your kids are home all day long. So you're not working throughout the day. So we have these fragmented schedules. Even when your kids are in school, you still have activities and just extracurriculars and just all these random things that you're doing as a mom. Because like we just do a ton of stuff as moms. So you have all these things. Then there's invisible labor, right? And that's, you're cooking, you're cleaning, the things that nobody ever thanks you for. You're not going to get an award for these things, but these are things that are required of you. Not to mention the invisible labor of being a business owner, right? Because there's all these decisions that you have to make and all the things that you need to keep up, the clients you have to keep up with, the conversations you have to keep up. Like, you know what people don't talk about? And this is another one. People don't talk about the fact that as a coach, consultant, advisor, whatever you are, service provider, you have to think about all the details of your clients' businesses, or all the details of who your client is, so that when you are conversing with them, you are in the moment and present with them to be able to support them. Now, imagine if you build a crazy business model for yourself and you say, oh, I'm going to have 40 one-on-one clients. That is you having to remember, and this is that invisible labor, you're having to remember the logistics of 40 different clients. That's insane, right? That's insane. And yet there are people out there that will teach that business model. Now, there's nothing wrong with that business model, right? If you have the capacity for that, if you have, if your business constraints allow you to do that, there's nothing wrong with that business model. But as a mom, okay, and we're full-time momming, that's crazy, right? That's very, very crazy. So we have to think about those things. Something else for moms, constant context switching. So one thing that I find myself constantly doing is I'm always in between talking to someone on Boxer and opening up a fruit snack. Like, baby, the way I have to switch context very quickly in my personal life to my business life, and then even within the business, sometimes something pops up and it's like, oh, I kind of need to address this now, so let me go ahead and do that. We're constantly switching in our context, and that slows down our productivity. Even though I try not to do it as much as possible, as moms, baby, if the kid needs his butt wiped, I have to stop what I'm doing and go wipe his butt. Like there's nothing else. Now, obviously, if dad's here, he can go do it. But otherwise, I'm doing these things. That's why it's so important to think about our business model and all of our constraints and all the things that we're talking about here. Lastly, the reason why just talking about capacity and your business model, like why all this is so important, is because at a certain point, you realize that there really is no recovery time and no off switch for motherhood and for your business. This is not, I don't look at this as a bad thing. I just look at it as it's part of your reality. Even when I am not working on my business, as much as I try not to think about my business outside of business hours, baby, if I see the color blue and it reminds me of you, I'm thinking about my client. Okay. Like that was so silly, but seriously, like if I'm thinking, if I see something or if I experience something in my regular life and I think about my client, I usually reach out to them. I usually say something. I remember one time it was like the Sabbath and I was, I forgot what I was doing. I think I was like leaving somewhere and I heard like a title and I immediately messaged my client. I was like, girl, I don't even be on Voxer on the Sabbath. Like my Voxer is closed. I opened this up because I thought of this. I saw this title and I had to tell you because you need to use this or you need to have something like this. And it was just so funny. Like it was like not a title, but it was like a sign or something. And I was like, girl, this is it. Like this is what we've been thinking of. And so anyway, I'm saying all this to say like, there really is like no recovery time or like off switch for us as moms and business owners. It does kind of all bleed together. And even though I don't want you to build a business that revolves around you constantly being active, and that's why all this conversation is so important. So this is not to say you don't need a business coach in this area or you don't need a, strategy over there or whatever, but you do need to have a strong foundation of what's happening underneath your entire business so that all those other working pieces can work well. So I want to lead you with, let's switch how you think about your business to being capacity first. So when we're thinking about our business, what I want you to think about is I want you to think about growth as, instead of we're just growing for the sake of growth, I want you to say, or like think to yourself, how can I grow with capacity first? Like how can I create a capacity first growth model in my business? And so what I will always say is that growth in your business, more sales, scaling, more money, more clients, that's not going to give you freedom. A really good business design will give you freedom. You know why? Because when your business is designed properly, if you have a good business model, you could step out of the business and the business could still work, right? And that's what I'm trying to get you to, girlfriend. I'm trying to get you to a point that you don't even have to be in the business. You could hire someone else to be a part of the business, be the face, be the person that's running the day-to-day. You can basically give all that stuff away and you just do what you are specifically good at. So the growth itself is not what gives you freedom. More sales, more money, like that is not what gives you the freedom. What actually gives you the freedom is how you've designed your business. And if you design your business to be able to stand on its own beyond you. Most people are growing their businesses by like chasing or constantly doing like you're constantly in the weeds. You have to be part of every step. You're doing every single thing. And as the business grows, the need for you as the founder continues to grow. That is the key. If you are the everything, like you know how people be like, ha, I'm the chief everything officer. Baby girl, I am not the chief everything officer. I am the officer of only the couple things that I want to do. Everything else, someone else can be in charge of because I don't got the time for it. And not in a mean way, but it's just like you can't grow and enjoy your life if you are constantly in every single minute detail of the business. It just does not work. And I want to be clear, this is not me saying that you have to have team members. You can have systems that do this for you. I have plenty of clients and actual like industry peers. They be building whole AI robots and stuff to do the stuff for them. But at least they have some sort of system and support. And underlying all of that, they have a very solid business model. They have a very solid, this is how my business is designed. This is how I get people in. This is how I get people out. This is how I serve them, whatever. And it's very, very solid so that they don't have to worry about, man, I'm doing all this work or I'm constantly in the weeds or I'm making all this money and I can't take a break. Baby girl, absolutely not. Like that's a hard pass. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be other things that are happening in your business that require your effort and attention, right? Because I will say this, as you build out a team, there's friction points in that. So this is not me just saying the business model is the end all be all. There's still there's leadership, right? So I'm really big on your business model and leadership, because between those things, business model, leadership, and then we can add decision making. When we put those three things together, you can fix, I would say, like 95% of your business problems. But what I will say is that we're not at the other two steps yet. Right now, we're just thinking about your business model. And so I really want you to think about a capacity first growth model where you're thinking about what is your capacity as the business grows. Will the need for me as the founder grow? And if that's the case, then we got to fix this. So I don't want you to grow your business where you're the one that's constantly doing. And so I know that some people will say like, oh, you shouldn't hire too early, this, that, and the third. As someone who has built businesses and waited way too late to hire, a lot of people can afford to hire a lot earlier than you do. It's just that you're not hiring out of fear. We'll have that conversation another day, though, girlfriend. But I promise you, you can afford to hire. And if you can't afford to hire, you can barter. You can there's plenty of ways to get the support that you need in order to build something that can grow outside of you and put you in a position where growth actually looks like freedom and not look like, oh man, me growing meant that I had to do more work, that I had to show up more, that I had to be more in this. Here's what I want to say about capacity first growth. Capacity growth is going to flip you from, oh, every time the business grows, I have to grow with it because I have to be a part of it, to, okay, the business grows without me having to like do more and be more active. So when you're in that phase, here are the three things that I would recommend shifting. Number one, you have to stop growing through expansion. You have to stop growing by creating new offers, being on new platforms, giving yourself new responsibilities. A lot of people, when you're expanding, when you're growing, you add a new offer. This new offer, you're like, oh yeah, I'm just doing one call a week. Okay, one call a week adds up, baby. And sometimes we all know, we say a call gonna be an hour long, we end up on there for 2 hours because you just can't help but to serve, right? I know that's me. I can't help but when I get on a call, baby, clear the afternoon, okay? Because if my kid's not bothering you, your kid's not bothering me, baby, I promise you, I'm gonna talk, okay? It's evidenced by how I be on this podcast where I'm just like constantly going, like I'm just constantly going. And so when we think about that, a lot of times we don't think about that when we're creating our new offers or whatever. And so because of that, our growth is happening through expansion, but it's happening through expansion of our own time, of our own capacity, of our own effort. And that's not always realistic. And it's not the best way to grow. So we want to think about capacity first growth. So that's the first thing. Shift from growing through expansion. Now we're shifting from there to growing through compression. When you're trying to grow, you actually need to be laser focused and all in on as few priorities as possible. So I'm not going to say you only need one because that would just be unrealistic. Now, some people have the capacity, right? The team, the structure, whatever. Like they have the things that they can just focus on one thing. But for a lot of us and for most moms, we're building businesses from anywhere from $100,000 a year to, I would say, maybe $1 million. So if you're getting up to like that $1 million point, a lot of times there are still a lot of like pretty tight constraints, maybe relatively small teams, things like that. And so in that case, I wouldn't recommend only focus on one thing. What I will say is that it's important that if you're trying to grow, grow through compression, grow through making things smaller and tighter. And so have fewer priorities, have tighter execution, have less context switching. So if you're focused on less things, it will allow you to grow exponentially in those areas. So one thing that I see a lot of people do when it comes to their marketing is that you will go and you will say, okay, I need to be on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and podcasts, right? But the thing is that it's just you, right? It's just, you don't got no team. It's just you vibing, right? That's a problem, okay? How can you do that and it actually honor your capacity as a mom? It's going to require more time than you have available to give. So it's about thinking those things through. So this is going to be a tactical thing that I want you to just work on like week by week. But every week I want you to ask yourself these 3 questions. What is expanding my responsibility? Okay. So what is requiring you to have to do more? Number 2, what is increasing your margin? So what are you doing or what did you do this week that gave you more space? It gave you more room, gave you more time. So this one actually might be like, what did you take off your plate? Okay. So what did you take off your plate? So what did you do to give yourself more margin? And the final question is, which one are you rewarding? So every week ask, did you reward yourself for taking more responsibility, for accepting more responsibility, for doing more things? Or did you reward yourself for increasing your margin, for taking more off your plate, for delegating, for creating systems, right? Which one are you rewarding? So I'll be honest, oftentimes I have rewarded expanding my responsibility. I've rewarded myself for, oh, I did this, I added this, I'm doing this thing. And after I filtered things, I was like, okay, girlfriend, you are doing too much. Like what you're doing is not setting you up for the growth that you want long term. So we have to be intentional. It doesn't mean that we can't have new ideas or new projects or anything. It just means as you're adding those things on, think to yourself, long term, what did this expand? Is this going to require more of me, or is this giving me more margin to do something else important? And so there will be some weeks that expanding your responsibility is the thing that you want to reward. You want to reward yourself for being able to start a new project or have this new idea. So it's not about either one of these being bad. What is the problem is that we don't want to continuously always think that we're growing by expanding our responsibility. So if growth is making your life feel smaller, if it's making it feel like, oh man, I'm growing this business, but it's requiring more of me, I'm not having the freedom that I thought I was going to have, then I want you to think about how can you compress it to fit your life again? How can you make sure that your business fits the constraints that you want to have? And maybe you need to add new constraints. Sometimes it's okay to say, you know what? I'm going to set the constraint of I'm not working any more than 20 hours a week. That constraint will really make you think, okay, I need to figure out how to compress this business down to fit this timeline, because right now I'm averaging 30 or 40 hours when really I need to get this down to a manageable 20. That's something to think about. And then you want to reward yourself for doing less, for increasing your margin, and not for adding more things to your plate. If all this still feels like a little bit crazy, like you're like, girl, I can't compress, I can't take things off my plate or whatever, I want you to stay for the next episode. I want you to make sure you subscribe and tune in and all the things, because in the next episode, I'm going to talk about why everything riding through you is what's making you feel like you can't compress, or you can't have a capacity first business model, or you can't grow thinking about your capacity first, right? There's so many conversations that I want to have, but these are some of the most important ones because these are the things that I saw come up consistently inside of my State of Moms in Business report that I did. One thing that I just kept seeing come up is that a lot of moms, like, we just feel uncomfortable or we feel disappointed or disconnected from our businesses, but like, we're missing all the bigger signs and signals of what's actually happening. And there are small things that we can improve, small areas that we can just change and just reclaim for ourselves that makes it to where we will actually enjoy our business again. So if you have not read the report, girl, what are you waiting on? Like, go read it. It's such a labor of love. There's so much juicy data, like actual tangible data. I share screenshots of conversations. I share screenshots of responses. I share the graphs of what the survey actually said. And it's going to be so helpful in just you understanding that you're not the only person that experiences or thinks about your business in this way. And also, all of us are sharing a very similar and unique experience as moms in business. So make sure you watch that or go read that. And until next time, I will talk to you later, darling. Okay, that was episode 2. I need to speed these up. Okay.